The world was heavy that day. It was the kind of day when even the sun seemed to hide behind a thick blanket of clouds, casting a dull grey shadow over everything. Eliza walked through the streets with her shoulders hunched, her hands stuffed deep into the pockets of her coat. She didn't know why she had chosen the longer route home. Maybe it was to avoid the same old familiar sights that felt like an unshakable weight on her chest. Or maybe it was just the way her mind wandered when it had nothing else to grasp onto. The loss of him still hung in the air, like smoke that never quite dissipated. It had been months since he left, months since their apartment had emptied of his laughter and his warmth. All the things she had once thought were permanent had turned to dust, slipping through her fingers without so much as a warning. No matter how many days passed, she still couldn't find the will to stop waiting, to stop hoping that maybe, just maybe, he would walk back through the door. Her life had become a monotonous blur. Work, home, sleep, repeat. A soft chime from her phone reminded her of an email she needed to answer, and yet her mind couldn't focus. She was tired, too tired for this constant ache in her chest that never let up. And then, as if by fate, she heard it. A soft, desperate mew. At first, it seemed so distant, just another stray cat meowing for food, for attention. But the sound lingered, pulling her out of the fog she'd been trapped in. The noise wasn't the usual whiny plea of an abandoned animal. There was something in it, a tremor of pain, of fear, that stirred her deeply. Without thinking, Eliza followed the sound, her steps quickening. She turned the corner, and there it was. A tiny, frail kitten lay in the gutter, its fur matted and damp, its body trembling. Its eyes were wide, filled with terror and exhaustion. The little creature was on the brink of death, her tiny form barely clinging to life. It was as if the world had abandoned it too. Eliza stopped dead in her track. The cat's cries were soft, almost too faint to hear, but they echoed deep within her. Without even thinking about it, Eliza's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't leave this creature alone. Not again. Not like the way she had been left alone to pick up the pieces of her own broken heart. She dropped to her knees, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps, her hands trembling as she reached out. The cat didn't move at first, but its wide, fearful eyes seemed to lock onto hers, a spark of recognition flashing between them. Maybe it was the instinct to help. Maybe it was the deep, abiding sense of responsibility that flickered to life in Eliza's chest, but she didn't hesitate. Gently, she scooped the tiny creature into her arms. The weight of it was light, almost fragile, as though she were holding something that might shatter at any moment. "I've got you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to the cat or to herself. For the first time in months, Eliza felt a tug in her chest that wasn't tied to sorrow. There was something raw and immediate about this moment, something that reached deep into her, reminding her that she was capable of caring again. She couldn't explain why this small dying creature was so important to her, but somehow she knew in that instant that it wasn't just the cat who needed saving. Little did she know the cat would save her in ways she hadn't even begun to imagine. The broken soul, Eliza had never considered herself the emotional type. She was the fixer, the problem solver. She had always been able to pull herself up by the bootstraps no matter what life threw at her. But that was before everything fell apart before him. His name still burned in her chest, a name she couldn't let go of, even when she wanted to. And she had wanted to. She had tried everything: therapy, journaling, long walks in the park, even moving to a new apartment. But nothing worked. Every corner of her life felt stained with the memory of him. She had thought love was supposed to make you whole, but what it had really done was break her in a way she couldn't repair. It had filled her with hope, and then torn that hope away, when he walked out of her life without so much as a word of explanation. That was 6 months ago. Since then, Eliza had been living in a haze of numbness. She went to work, nodded politely when her colleagues spoke to her, and came home to an apartment that had once been filled with their laughter. Now it felt empty, too empty. The silence was oppressive, suffocating. The memories of their time together echoed in every room, leaving her with a constant reminder that love could be both beautiful and cruel. It was on one of these endless grey days that she found the cat. Eliza had walked straight from work, her mind on autopilot, as she wandered the streets. The city felt so big, so full of people going about their lives, but it was as though she was walking alone in a world that no longer understood her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it, too tired to deal with whatever work issue needed her attention. She had spent months in an emotional cocoon, unwilling to break free, unwilling to let anyone in. But then, the cat had appeared, fragile and broken. As Eliza carried it home, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the creature in her arms, light but fragile. She couldn't help but feel as though she was carrying more than just a wounded animal. She was carrying a piece of her broken heart. She didn't know why, but the small, helpless creature felt like the answer she had been waiting for. She rushed to the vet, where the diagnosis was grim. The cat had clearly been abandoned and left to die. Her body was weak, malnourished, and covered in wounds from what appeared to be a fight with another animal. The vet gave Eliza a look of sympathy, but also warned her that the chances of survival were slim. "I'll do whatever it takes," Eliza said, before the vet could finish. They tried their best to save the little creature. Eliza stayed by its side through every test, every painful procedure. Her heart ached for it in ways she couldn't quite explain. She found herself thinking of it as a reflection of her own brokenness. The first few days were a blur of uncertainty, of watching the cat's tiny body struggle to survive. Eliza poured her heart into it, feeding it small amounts of food, cleaning its wounds, and whispering soft words of comfort. And slowly, as the days passed, the cat began to fight back. She started to show signs of life, first the slightest movement of her paws, then the flicker of her eyes, bright and alert, looking at Eliza as though she understood the sacrifice she had made. With every small victory, Eliza began to feel something inside her shift. It was a subtle thing at first, a softening of the walls she had built around her heart. But it was there. It was as if the cat's survival gave her permission to start living again. And then on the third night, when the cat finally opened her eyes and let out a small, almost inaudible meow, Eliza realized something profound. She wasn't just healing the cat was healing her too. A fragile bond. The days turned into weeks, and Eliza found herself spending more and more time with the cat, who had been named Luna after a moment of quiet reflection. Luna, for all her fragility, had a presence that made Eliza's world feel just a little less empty. Every morning, Eliza would wake up to find the little cat curled up beside her, nestled in the blankets, her small, warm body a comforting presence. The quiet purring, the soft vibration against her chest, became the soundtrack of her mornings, replacing the silence that had once suffocated her. Eliza began to take the time to sit by Luna's side, just watching her, as if trying to learn something from the way the cat had fought so hard for life. There were still days when Luna was weak, days when the tiredness from her injuries still overwhelmed her small body. But she was healing, little by little, just as Eliza was. Eliza had always been the type to fill her life with distractions. She'd always thrown herself into work or activities or the things she thought would numb the pain. But now, with Luna, there was a strange calm. The act of caring for the cat became more than a responsibility. It became a therapy of its own. There was something deeply therapeutic about the gentle care she extended to Luna. It allowed her to focus on something outside of her own hurt, something that needed her in a way that nothing else did. In the quiet moments, as Luna stretched out in the sunlight, streaming through the window, or batted lazily at the dangling strings of yarn, Eliza would watch the cat and reflect on her own brokenness. Luna's physical wounds were healing. Her fur was becoming soft again, her eyes clear and bright. But it was more than just that. It was the way Luna would look at her, the way the cat seemed to trust her, to rely on her for everything. The cat, who had come from a place of fear and suffering, had learned to trust again. And in doing so, she had begun to show Eliza that healing, even for humans, took time and tenderness. One day, while Eliza sat on the couch, her journal opened, but forgotten beside her, Luna jumped up beside her, her little body lightly nudging Eliza's arm as she curled up. The weight of the cat's body was warm, solid, real. Eliza froze, unsure what to do, but then she gently ran her fingers through Luna's soft fur. The sensation grounded her, calming the endless storm in her mind. And in that moment, Eliza found herself doing something she hadn't done in a long time. She spoke, out loud, to someone other than herself. "I don't know how to fix this."
"Luna," she whispered. "I don't know how to get over him. I don't know how to make sense of any of it." Luna raised her head, staring at her with wide eyes before rubbing her face against Eliza's hand.
A silent act of reassurance. In the cat's response, Eliza felt something stir in her chest. Perhaps it wasn't about fixing things. Perhaps it was just about being present, allowing herself to feel, to let go of the pieces of herself she had been clutching so tightly for so long. It was the first time Eliza had allowed herself to fully release the grief. Luna had been there, patient and understanding, like a small, quiet anchor in a world that had been spinning too fast. And so, Eliza began to trust, just a little. She started taking tiny steps back into the world. She took Luna on short walks around the neighborhood, letting the cat's playful energy remind her that life didn't have to be all sadness and loss. They explored together, stepping into the light of each new day with tentative steps, a fragile bond that was slowly becoming something more. The turning point, a month passed, and Luna's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. She had gone from a near-death state to a vibrant, active cat. Her coat was sleek and shiny, and her energy levels were enough to make Eliza laugh, especially when Luna would chase after a ball or pounce at the occasional fly that managed to sneak its way inside the apartment. But more than just physical healing, something deeper was happening. Eliza could feel it in her own heart. As Luna grew stronger, so did Eliza. The emptiness she had lived with for so long started to recede. She found herself smiling at little things, like the way the sunlight glinted off the trees in the park, or the way Luna would curl up at her feet as they sat together in the evenings. Eliza began to notice a change in herself too. The constant ache she had lived with, the one that had defined her life after he left, started to ebb. It wasn't that she no longer missed him. She did. She always would. But she realized that life was about more than just surviving the past. It was about moving forward, even when you didn't feel ready. It was a slow process, but with each day, Eliza took another small step. She reconnected with old friends she had pushed away, sent a few cautious messages to family, and even began to consider going back to work full-time. It felt like a leap of faith, a tiny step back into the world of the living. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Eliza sank down onto the couch, feeling emotionally drained. She had been going through the motions, trying to keep herself together. But the truth was, there were still moments when the pain would hit her like a wave. Luna, who had been resting on the windowsill, leapt down and padded over to Eliza, her tail flicking with curiosity. Without a second thought, Luna jumped up onto Eliza's lap, curling up there as though she belonged. Eliza smiled softly, brushing a few strands of hair behind her ear as she stared down at the cat. "You've been through so much," Eliza whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me how to survive, how to keep going." Luna's response was a soft purr, and Eliza, despite the weight of the sadness that still lingered, felt a moment of peace settle over her. For the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. She felt the warmth of another being, someone who had been broken just like her, and yet had fought her way back to the light. In that moment, Eliza knew that the love she had been searching for, had been missing, wasn't going to come from anyone else. It was going to come from herself. It was going to come from embracing the love she had for Luna, and the love Luna had shown her in return. The role reversal. As the weeks turned into months, Luna's transformation became even more remarkable. She had gone from a sickly, near-death stray to a healthy, spirited cat with a strong personality all her own. She had become more than just a pet to Eliza. She had become her companion, her confidant, and in many ways, her protector. The bond between them had grown stronger than Eliza ever thought possible. There were moments when Luna would nudge her hand gently, as though sensing when Eliza needed comfort. At night, when Eliza was alone with her thoughts, Luna would curl up beside her, keeping her company in the darkness. Her presence was a constant reminder that there was love in the world, even when it felt like it had all slipped away. And in return, Eliza had become fiercely protective of Luna. She had witnessed the cat's struggle to survive, and she knew what it was like to fight for
life, to fight for a second chance.
She had vowed to always care for Luna, to always be there for her. But what Eliza didn't realize was that Luna had become her protector in her own way. There were nights when Eliza would wake up in the middle of the night, her heart racing, the weight of her grief pushing her into a pit of despair. But Luna would be there, sitting at the edge of the bed, her wide eyes watching over her, a silent guardian in the night. It was one such night, when Eliza's anxiety had overtaken her, that Luna's role as protector became painfully clear. Eliza had been struggling with the anniversary of his departure, the wound still fresh in her mind despite the passing time. Her heart felt heavy, like an anchor pulling her down, and the tears came in waves. She had thought she was past the worst of it, but the truth was, grief wasn't something you could schedule. Luna, sensing Eliza's distress, jumped up onto the bed, snuggling close to her side. The cat's soft purring, rhythmic and steady, seemed to fill the room, creating a calm that Eliza had never known. Eliza held Luna close, the warmth of her small body offering comfort like nothing else. "I don't know how to let go," she whispered. "I don't know how to move forward." Luna didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. Instead, she simply stayed, her purring a steady, unbreakable rhythm against Eliza's chest. In that moment, Eliza understood. She didn't need to let go completely. She just needed to keep going one step at a time, just as Luna had. New beginnings. Spring had arrived. The days were warmer, and the sun seemed to shine a little brighter. The flowers bloomed outside Eliza's window, and the world began to feel a little more alive. Eliza, too, felt a little more alive. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer consumed her. She had learned to live with it, to embrace it as part of her story, but not as the whole of it. She spent more time outside, letting Luna explore the parks and paths they had once avoided. She reconnected with old friends, laughed at silly things, and found herself rediscovering joy in the smallest of moments. Luna, who had been the catalyst for her healing, was no longer just a symbol of what had been saved. She was a part of Eliza's new story, one where love, loss, and healing all intertwined into something beautiful. One afternoon, as Eliza sat by the window, with Luna curled up on her lap, she watched the world go by. She smiled softly, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin and the gentle weight of Luna in her arms. The cat looked up at her with trusting eyes, and for a moment, Eliza couldn't help but feel grateful for the journey that had brought her.
"Here! You've saved me, Luna," Eliza whispered. And as Luna let out a soft meow, Eliza knew, deep in her heart, that it wasn't just the cat who had been rescued. They had both saved each other in ways neither of them could have imagined.